We are very lucky to speak with Stephen Vasconcellos today for an unhurried conversation. Stephen is an expert in the field of regenerative business. He is the author of The Regenerative Enterprise, an inspiring and comprehensive book about why the world needs regenerative business. He is also the co-founder of an environmental services company with a mission to empower businesses on their journey towards sustainability and regeneration. So thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us today. We really appreciate this. We've really been looking forward to this conversation. Just to get us started, what was it that sparked your interest in regenerative business? What motivated you to write the book?
Thanks, Catherine and David and Manuel, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you, EarthWork Collective, today. Thank you for the question and the interest in our work. Your question was what my motivation was to get into the space of regenerative business. And it's quite a difficult question for me to answer, actually, because it evolved over time. I mean, as you can imagine, it's not that I grew up, or any of us grew up for that matter, knowing what regenerative business even was, or with a clear-eyed concept of what regenerative actually meant. And I still feel that we're largely in that same space where the field is emerging and we're all trying to make sense of what this regenerative impulse actually is. And it's a growing field of regenerators and regenerative thinkers who are responding to this impulse and reflecting deeply on it with their own points of view as to what that field is. I used to have a fairly big business quite a few years ago, and it wasn't regenerative, but it was a good business. You know, we certainly weren't harming anybody, and we were trying to do good in our own way. In more recent years, I have committed myself to telling a new story to respond to the need to make sense of what's happening in this world. You know, to tell a new story for this historic moment. You know, whatever is unfolding with all of these existential crises that we're facing, you know, these meta crises and, you know, maybe the poly crisis of all of these different crises that are overlapping and intertwined and very hard to deal with, you know, any one of them by themselves, but let alone, you know, coming at us from all directions all at the same time. And so I wanted to make sense of that. And in writing about this, so I published a book about 7 years ago called Imaginal Cells, Visions of Transformation. It was basically a collection of essays from major thought leaders and people who are doing, you know, delivering great change. So, you know, to name a few of the essayists who contributed to that book, Al Gore, Desmond Tutu, Muhammad Yunus, all Nobel Prize winners. And then there were other people like Johan Rockström, who is a scientist was working at the Stockholm Resilience Centre, working on planetary boundaries. Thomas Lovejoy, the godfather of biodiversity. And then there were people like Paul Polman, the then CEO of Unilever, contributing his view on the need for partnerships and thinking outside of silos and the role of business in making change. You know? But that book was largely, it was about compassion, really, and creating a compassionate narrative for people and planet. But it was largely from a sustainability lens. And even though my intention was to speak to global transformation. So that's what I was focused on, and set up a charity called Reboot Future to deliver that narrative, you know, across business, society, and education. Within a few years, I started to get disillusioned through, you know, the conversations we were having about that narrative with members, essentially members of the elite, you know, people who were at the very top of their game in places like Davos, which isn't a place that I, you know, hang around much, but I did have the opportunity to go and launch the book there. And so that, you know, it was an interesting moment for me to dip into that world and see what it was all about. Lots of people talking about sustainability, but also lots of people were talking about sustainability who weren't necessarily thinking in terms of global transformation and the opportunity, but what can I get out of this for me and my business kind of mindset. And so I saw that business was pushing humanity over the precipice, and nature were now 6 or 7 thresholds of the 9 thresholds of the planetary boundaries. 6 or 7 of those have now been breached. We're flat code red moment for humanity. The red lights flashing and saying, guys, wake up. We need to change our system in order to deliver transformational change. Otherwise, it may be game over for life as we, it will be game over for life as we know it. I'm not saying that it means the end of all of our lives, but we're talking about 4 degrees over the next decade. We're talking about hundreds of millions of climate refugees and agricultural systems failing, society breaking down. And this is not me as some crazy crank saying that. It's the US military who are game planning that for that scenario, and they're saying this is what it looks like. It's the end of our society and civilization as we know it. So that in itself was a huge motivator, and understanding that it's not all doom and gloom. First book was called Imaginal Cells for a reason. There are 7 billion cells in the caterpillar. And in the dying caterpillar, it has engorged itself and consumed 1.5 or 2, maybe even more times its body weight before it enters a cocoon. It has 100,000 cells in it that hold the vision for the transformation of the butterfly. And that transformation process is not easy for the caterpillar. It involves breaking down. So the body of the caterpillar essentially breaks down inside the cocoon. And then those imaginal cells spring into action and they start to cluster and multiply and they carry along more cells. And then they use the goop, the breakdown mess, which is aligning against them to create a completely different being, which is the butterfly, with a completely different DNA.
I love the
That's
idea.
what motivates me, is the transformation that they are doing.
I love the idea that we could take this mess that we're in and turn it into a butterfly.
Actually, the book does a really good job at bringing the nature metaphors in an inspiring and hopeful way. So that was one thing I wanted to say, Stephen. I'm super grateful for that part. Even though it's a very business-oriented book and it's practical, it has very good questions to keep people thinking. It also has the space to imagine and inspire ourselves into this new future that's possible. And that's a rare event in the literature on sustainability and ecological practices these days, because there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. And what I discovered in this book is a space to breathe and think through how businesses can be part of this transformation. So that's where we grabbed at it in terms of small and medium businesses are many. And they are part of this transformation because they link us to our localities usually. And there's so many opportunities there. For people who don't know anything about regenerative business, how would you define that for a person?
So the field itself is emergent. And so it's very difficult to define. But essentially, what is regenerative? Well, regenerative is an impulse in life. Life doesn't think in terms of being sustainable at all. That's not one of life's operating principles. That's a projection, from a system that wants to hold on for dear life to what it has created in order to avoid the opportunity of transformation. No, life does not seek to sustain itself. Life seeks to flourish and thrive. And it's always about creating new potential and possibilities. That is regenerative. Sustainability isn't quite like that. It's sustainability is about holding on. It's probably a fear-based response, holding on to what we know to protect the ways that we feel comfortable with and the system we feel comfortable with, because we're frightened of jumping in, taking a risk to see and to swim to what's on the other side of the shore. No, it's about holding on to the banks of the shore that we're scared to leave. Yeah, but we're being sort of pushed over the edge just now, because of the situations that we face, and sustainability is no longer sustainable. No, we have to take a risk and jump in. So the question was, how do you define regenerative business? Yeah. Regenerative business is about aligning with life's regenerative impulse. So life, essentially manifests in cycles of death, rebirth, and regeneration. Maybe that's a parenthesis. And of course there are lots of other cycles, within that parenthesis, and maybe there are cycles that are beyond that parenthesis as well. But I would say that life is always about maximizing its inherent potential and exploring opportunities. And so regenerative business is about attuning itself to life's principles. So finding humility, it's that expression as it enters into right relationship with nature. And so what's right relationship with nature? Well, it's playing by nature's rules. Nature does not really work according to an extraction and exploitation mindset, which is how humanity has showed up since the Romans, at the very least. Yeah. And so nature does not play by an extraction and exploitation mindset. Nature seeks to deliver the highest possible benefit for all of its constituent parts. So nature speaks to the whole. And so regenerative business is about right relationship to nature, and it's about seeking the fullest expression of that organization or business entity in relation to nature and in relation to all of nature and all of humanity. And of course it's a fractal thing. It's a fractal thing. You start where you are. And so regenerative business is also about playing by nature's rules. And because it's about being in the right relationship, it's also about being connected to the locality. It's about being connected to place. Having a right relationship with local communities and honoring and respecting the local nature and local biodiversity. It's all of those things. We're still trying to work out what regenerative business actually means. We've had a fair stab in the book about defining it, and I think we come up with about 8 different qualities that we've observed in regenerative businesses. But essentially, this is what it's about. It's about being in right relationship to nature, honoring place, speaking to the highest potential of our human family, yeah, and having an inbuilt purpose, because you can't fudge it unless you have a purpose and a mission that speak to those things in some way.
I want to come back to the localization piece because I find this really fascinating. But before, you talked about why people might not embrace regenerative business because out of fear, losing what they already have, holding on to what they know, finding reasons to support their current beliefs as opposed to changing their mind to a new way of thinking. Do you think that we can change people's minds, or is that even necessary to change everyone's mind? What would you say to someone that says, I just don't believe in that stuff?
Oof. So it's a really interesting, it's a really good question. And of course, it speaks to our moment, right? Because this is not a moment where we can abdicate our responsibility to others. We all need to stop being armchair warriors at this moment and get off our tushes and stand up and be counted. Or as many of us as possible need to stand up and be counted in this moment and align ourselves with the change that Mother Earth is demanding of us. And consciousness it requires from us as we are advancing towards this critical moment, which is also an opportunity for our ongoing transformation as a species and the transformation of Mother Earth. But why not support? Oh my goodness, can we persuade these people? Can we persuade naysayers? Well, my sense is because it's a game of consciousness, it's very difficult to persuade anybody who is entrenched in their value set to become regenerative. I mean, you see how difficult it is to persuade these organizations and people to become green or sustainable or change their cars. Not that I'm a big fan of the electric car as a solution that can fix all of our problems either. I think we need to think beyond even some of these memes, and in order to fix our issues. But we have an issue that relates to how we perceive ourselves as a species, okay? And that goes out to the individual level. And many people are just not ready for this because they've not done the inner work to unlearn what they know in order to open themselves up in humility to receive what life wants them to receive. Yeah. And so I feel we've got to be very careful about how we onboard people, and I think leading by example, of course, really important. Getting the information out there, talking, with all of our conviction, heart, and humility, right? Because if I look at my own journey, I was also one of these people. It's not like I woke up and understood what regenerative is. I'm still trying to work it out. And I've just written a book on it and spent 4 or 5 years thinking about it, So there is a question of being humble and having an open heart and having an open mind. But I think it's that old adage of maybe we can't bring the horse to the water to make it drink this time, but what we can do is lead by example, offer support where it's welcome, inspire others and create a pathway. This is a bit of the road less traveled. We're clearing the path and, we're co-creating this new pathway to this possible future. The best possible future our hearts may know is possible. Let's see how this unfolds. But I think that the best way is to lead by example. If we look at how this unfolded for the field of social enterprise, it's still very much an ongoing process, but essentially you name the fields. That's what happened first. There were some thinkers that named the field, actually from the 1960s onwards, and then by the 1970s, there were some actors who started to bring cohesion to the field of social entrepreneurship. And then, there were some players like Bill Drayton from Ashoka who created a fellowship of social entrepreneurs. And then there were some organizations that created social enterprise academies. And then there were people that wrote books on this. And then, there were organizations wanting to support social entrepreneurs and even nurture and inspire others to be social entrepreneurs. And then some young people anyway, wanted to become social entrepreneurs all by themselves because they learned about it. And so in the book, we talk about ecological succession. What happens in the process of ecological succession is you might have a barren landscape. Maybe it's after a forest fire, after a volcano has degraded the landscape to such a point where it's almost as if it's like a moonscape. There's almost nothing on it. But actually, that's fertile ground for the beginning of a new regenerative process called succession. And then you have mosses that start to form and break through the rocks. And then you've got pioneer plants like birch that might colonize the landscape. And then, there are other different types of bushes. Over time, that barren landscape is transformed, through various stages into something that can flourish and thrive. So, this is what I think we've got to do, is to intentionally co-create this new system in parallel to the other degenerative system so that we can give this our best chance of a success. And we have one foot in this dying world, in this dying system, rather, and one foot in this emergent system. And so we need to feed what is beautiful. And understand that perspective, that cosmology will essentially die and die into what is emergent. And so this is what I believe is happening right now.
That process can take time, and the consciousness that comes along with it, whether it be for the individual or the business, is a process. It's a developing thing. It's not one day you wake up and you have this regenerative business out of nothing. It's something that is built over time. And so it's not a magic solution. You try this today and tomorrow you'll be better. And I really like the fact that you say you have one foot in one system and one foot in the other, because you're still operating in this capitalistic system. What are the risks and opportunities you think for businesses to become regenerative?
So at a time where essentially our systems have become degenerative and business is degenerative, it's not a risk to become regenerative. The risk is to stay contributing to this degenerative system, to continue to pull the system off the precipice. And that's where we are today. It's the risk of inaction or maintaining the status quo that's the risk. That's where all the degenerative risk is. That's where the risk of collapse is. It's where the risk of dystopia is. And you're going to risk potentially some short-term benefit, but that's an illusion. It is absolutely an illusion, because it might be short-term benefit today, but in 10 years or 15 years' time, when we have 100 million climate refugees and Mother Nature has basically started to break down on a scale that it's almost unfathomable to imagine, that we're having to deal with ocean acidity levels rising with 4 degrees. If we're at 1.3 just now, 1.3, 1.5 right now, we're already in breakdown. And we can see the effects of these fires that are spontaneously erupting in parts of the world but we're not used to having fires. Even in London, my goodness, on the fringes of London last year, the year before, there were a couple of streets burned down. Absolutely unthinkable. And our climate here, which is not exactly conducive to fire. So the risk of inaction is where the real risk is. It's still possible to make money by degenerative practices with an extraction and an exploitation mindset. But is that really where you want to be? That was okay for our grandparents' generation and generations before, because the planet could sustain that. But since the early 1970s and, Donna Meadows' Limits to Growth report, we reached a tipping point where, that was untenable. It would have been good to have become sustainable then, yeah, and then become regenerative now. But that ship has sailed, and so we really need to get with the program. And this is a program of change that is unprecedented at any point in human history. Even in relation to the time of the great shifts that occurred when we transitioned from a feudal system to a system that enabled democratic governance and all of the scientific and artistic and philosophical inquiry that came with the Renaissance. That was a complete shift in worldview, and we're right at the beginning of another one right now. And so we need to see that for what it is, and essentially work out, each and every one of us, what our personal response to that is, how we are going to be shaped, and how we want to shape this reality as it unfolds around us. Because you can be damn sure that if we don't, stand up and start to shape it, it will shape us. And it's going to have huge feedback loops and repercussions and impacts across every aspect of our lives. So, what are the risks? I mean,
as you said,
the risks are the end of life if we're not.
And the risk is in not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to touch on one thing you said earlier, if I might, is there is a lot of moral judgment currently in what we're doing and trying to promote as a mission. But, at EarthWork, we try to find common ground, and where do we align with people that aren't interested in doing it for moral reasons? And it tends to be, as you kind of stated already, the answer is in regenerative. It's a benefit for everybody. It's a mutually balanced benefit for all parts of a system. So every part of a system, if it actually benefits, can be incentivized. And the Industrial Revolution wasn't a moral judgment. It wasn't a moral mission. It was people were incentivized for economics and efficiency and standard of living. So that was a huge shift in human history, that change, but for survival and for economic gain. And I think we're on the same precipice right now, but we're looking at doing it a different way, as opposed, rather than extracting, which is what the Industrial Revolution did for us. We're going to regenerative. So it seems like we're on the beginning of a wave as well. But that, I think, is where people would become more interested. We can't get to their morals, but we can get to their pocketbook and their interest in surviving.
Yeah, absolutely, and for future generations. But the thing is, I mean, we're between two different cosmologies. We are transitioning from a cosmology of top-down power, wealth, resources, a value set that essentially was all about winners and losers. It was all about extraction and exploitation of resources. I mean, even the concept of human resources, it's to a system of value for all and sharing those resources more equitably throughout a regenerative paradigm.
One of the big aha moments in the book for me was about supply chain and value webs. I really love the idea of value web, and that we're interconnected in this way and collaborative. that we are here to help each other and add value to each other, benefit in a relational way, like we have a relationship. This is not just a single interaction. So that was a wonderful chapter in the book.
Thank you. Thank you. If you go back to, I think the Incan civilization, the concept of reciprocity was law. And virtually, well, as far as I know, every single indigenous wisdom tradition that I have encountered, this understanding of reciprocity and a mutual exchange is ingrained into their traditional practices and their relationship with nature. So they don't take without giving back, you know? And so, and they have this Ubuntu, so they might not call it Ubuntu in every part of the world. Ubuntu is from Southern Africa, but, you know, they have this Ubuntu mindset of wholeness, of seeing that I am me and you are me also. I am you. You know, we're all each other, you know, that we share a common humanity. And if I am doing something to benefit myself at your expense, then ultimately I'm hurting myself at some level of my beingness. Yeah. But what is interesting about this particular moment is we've been evolving our consciousness over thousands of years. And for sure, there were wise men and women and philosophers and teachers and leaders and thinkers who understood this and expressed these sentiments. But now, there's a huge surge in consciousness, a huge surge in people with access to tools because of the internet and globalization before. We have access to tools to advance our consciousness, advance our awareness, and advance our understanding of the world that we never had access to before. And so, this has been hugely enriching for us as a humanity. And it's now allowing us to express what it means to be human beings and becomings in a completely different way. So, we're understanding what it is to be human. These crises that we're facing are possibly the most incredible teachers that we could ever have dreamed of having. And of course, they're terrifying as well at some level, but they're reminding us that we are all interconnected and that we're all part of one giant human family. We can't hope to solve any of these polycrises, any of these crises, either alone as one organization, one government, or one facet of our societies. We need to come together in order to work across silos in order to tackle these issues. And that's the diamond in this polycrisis. These are challenging times, and a lot of people are suffering, and we see war breaking out in different parts of the world, and people losing their lives every day. 700 million people, struggling to have a nutritious meal every day. And that's just it's not acceptable. I think that at some point we're going to have a moment of lucidity where we see the folly of it all, and we're forced to reckon with who we are, each of us. And that will allow us to forge a new humanity.
Yeah, it's no small feat, huh? It's a tall order, that moment of lucidity, and I don't claim to have it on a regular basis. But when you take a moment to take it all in, there's like a grieving process that needs to happen, because we are part of this. We have responsibility in it, but it's also, as you said, an amazing teacher. And if you get experiential about it, if you live it in your everyday life, and you follow the clues of positive feedback energy, and you can find the way. We know how to do this. Like, as you say, we are part of nature. She is part of us. We follow her lead. If we look at her, she has very good examples on how to do this.
Absolutely. And, what's the key to unlocking our greatest future? It's collaboration. Radical collaboration. The radical collaboration is absolutely the key to unlocking our best possible future. In the book, we talk about, so we are now facing the world's 6th greatest extinction. At no time since the dinosaurs have species been dying off at a faster rate than today. 50% of the world's species have died in the last 50 or 60 years alone because of the pressures of consumption and this onslaught into, the remaining untouched and unspoiled corners of our precious planet. So we're in the world's 6th greatest extinction. But, I thought it was interesting to look at some of these previous extinctions and what happened. And they also speak to the planet's ability to die in a way and then to regenerate. And so this is a process that the Earth has gone through 6 times before, according to geological records. And every time there's been a dying. We die every year. We die every day. Every month, every cell in our body dies, and we're regenerated. Trillions of cells. There's a whole different us. So the first greatest extinction was, when the first manifestation of life on our beautiful planet was in the form of cyanobacteria, probably brought to us by an asteroid. And so that seeded life. But single cell, cyanobacteria were single cells, and they essentially were very successful in colonizing Mother Earth. And so successful that at some point they started to interact with the biosphere. And much in the same way that our success as a species has led to the same set of symptoms. And so what happened was Mother Earth then entered a new process. That was the end of that particular system. That provoked a crisis. And 75% of the cyanobacteria died in that transition. But what happened, the other 25% learned that the only way that they could survive was by adapting their MO to thrive. And in order to thrive, they formed associations, they formed new bonds, they formed collectives. And that allowed for a big bang in life to take place, which was the genesis of multicellular life that has allowed this Garden of Eden, 5 more extinctions later to flourish. So we may well be in the process of another regenerative death and rebirth. I hope that 75% of us are not going to die. I feel that our opportunity now is to read the tea leaves and understand what has happened across these huge cycles in time.
And also feel
and to draw the lessons.
Yeah, feel the lessons. We're not, sometimes we're taught that we are in a competitive world, and that whole view has to be overthrown, if I may, by the collaborative nature of life. We are not in competition with each other. We are here to collaborate. And that shift, just that shift, is crucial. But I feel it happening more and more.
You know, our modern society is built on a few lies. One of them is that growth can go on ad infinitum. Nothing grows forever. Everything has its own cycle. You know, that's one of the laws of nature. You know, and if you take a long view, you'll see that. There's a complete arrogance, complete hubris to believe that things could just grow, including our economy. Our economy can grow forever and ever. No, not at all. You know, only cancers want to grow forever. You know, so being regenerative is about finding humility in this cycle of life, alongside all of our other living relations. Another couple of the lies that modern society tells us are that nature is vicious. You know, okay, there might be aspects of nature that may be vicious. Crocodiles, you know, king cobras, you know, black mambas, whatever. But they're the exceptions to the rule. Mother Nature is nurturing and loving, and the life-affirming principle is all about collaboration and supporting the highest good for the benefit of all. And so, yes, you know, being regenerative means submitting ourselves to these life-affirming principles. And this is our opportunity, you know, to evolve as a species into, I don't know yet, quite know what, you know, but into a collaborative species, to step outside of our small-minded, ego-driven worldviews, and to see the bigger picture, and to find our empathy and humanity, and you know, our own missions within that. And I think it's a really exciting moment. Of course, we don't really know exactly how it's going to unfold, but yeah, for sure, it's exciting, and I want to be part of that. This is an historic moment, you know, and I think the invitation is for all of us to let go of the safety of what we know that's behind us, and be prepared to get into the water and get wet, yeah, and to be part of this beautiful process.
Thank you, Stephen. That is an excellent wrap up to our conversation. That was beautiful, poignant. There's so much more we want to ask you, but I want to be mindful of your time. Is there any way that you'd come back and talk to us again? We
absolutely
enjoyed this so much. You said so much that spoke to how we're speaking and what we're trying to do in the world. A lot of the connections that we're making, you brought up today. It was almost perfect. If we had scripted it, I don't think we could have done better.
Oh, bless you. I'm happy. It's such a pleasure. I'm really excited for the work that you're doing. It's really important.
And if we were in person, I would ask you to sign my book. I'll imagine you doing it for me.
Bless you. Oh, bless you. You know, this is my second book, and I don't think I'll ever get used to signing books, because it feels it feels like I'm taking myself really seriously.
So,
you know, there's nothing in the book that wasn't really thought before. You know, it's all common sense, you know? So I just feel like, you know, Niels and I, you know, brought a lot of other people's work together, and yeah, it's speaking to what Mother Nature has provided for us and her original instructions.
Even Darwin cited other authors.
Sorry?
Even Darwin cited other authors.
Oh yeah, for sure. And there's some great people working in the space. That speaks to this moment as well. I don't want to talk down with the book. I want to lift up, you know, and that's the whole point. It's meant to, that's why so many questions, you know. It's meant to spark thinking, trigger thinking, and to inspire people, and yeah, hopefully allow them to consider this, you know, this moment that we're living in from a different lens. So Yeah, I'm glad that you guys responded. Thank you so much.
The
And if
questions
there's anything I
are
can do.
very valuable. At the end of each section or chapter, there's questions, and it actually got me to read the book a whole lot slower, because
Mhm.
when I got to those questions, I was able to ponder, what does this question mean in terms of EarthWork Collective? Like, we have a business, we have a startup. What does it mean to us? And that reflection is super valuable. So I recommend anyone who has a business who wants to look at it through the lens of regenerative thinking to go buy the book and ponder those questions and take your time. It's not I don't have the answers to all the questions in this book, and I think I can go back and get a more rich answer as time evolves.
It's a process, right? And so that process might take some organizations 10 years or 20 years, or maybe they'll just tackle one aspect of this. Maybe they'll decide to revolutionize their supply chains and transform the supply routes. Or maybe, they'll transform into some cooperative ownership model. But, they engage with it wherever they're at.
Yeah.
Okay, I wish you all an amazing Friday and
Perfect.
all the best. Take care.
Okay,
Thank you.
All the best.